Lisa Martinez walked through the bright corridors of Kepler Prime University. Her shoes made soft sounds on the metal floor as she headed to her first class. This was her third week at the galaxy's most famous school, and she was still getting used to seeing so many different types of aliens every day. The university was huge and shiny. Students from 12 different worlds came here to learn together. Lisa was the first human ever accepted into the program. She felt proud, but also nervous about representing her entire species in the hallway. She passed a group of Valkyrie students. They nodded politely at Lisa as she walked by. A few Nexari students floated past her. They had 4 arms each and spoke by moving their hands in complex patterns. Their translator devices turned their gestures into words that Lisa could understand. One of them waved all 4 hands at her in greeting. Lisa smiled and waved back. She had been studying alien cultures for years, but actually living with them was different from reading about them in books. She reached the classroom for Advanced Tactical Theory. The room was round with seats arranged in circles. A big holographic projector sat in the center, ready to show battle scenarios from across the galaxy. Professor Kelvin was already there, setting up the day's lesson. Professor Kelvin looked like a giant insect with multiple eyes and clicking mandibles. His translator made his voice sound calm and professional. Lisa had learned that he was one of the most respected military historians in the galaxy. Other students began filing into the room. Lisa recognized most of them by now. There was Janet, a Zephyrian whose see-through body glowed with soft lights. Her people could float instead of walking, which Lisa thought was amazing. Yes, came Kevin, an Exori with bright blue markings on his forearms. He was always friendly and asked good questions in class. The Valkyrie students entered together, as they usually did. They moved gracefully, and their skin showed peaceful green colors. Lisa had learned that Valkyrie rarely did anything alone. They preferred group decisions and harmony. Lisa took her usual seat near the middle of the room. She pulled out her tablet and prepared to take notes. Professor Kelvin activated the holographic display, and a 3-dimensional battlefield appeared. Above their heads, "Today we will study the siege of Tertius 7, Professor Kelvin announced. His compound eyes looked around the room. This conflict lasted 3 months. 2 fleets fought over control of a mining colony. Many lives were lost on both sides. The hologram showed spaceships surrounding a planet. Supply lines and troop movements were displayed in different colors. The question for today is simple," Professor Kelvin continued. "How could this conflict have been resolved without so much death and destruction? What peaceful solutions might have ended this siege faster?" Arms, tentacles, and various appendages rose around the room. This was normal in Professor Kelvin's class. Students loved to discuss peaceful ways to solve old conflicts. Janet the Zephyrian spoke first. Her body pulsed with gentle yellow light as she talked. Economic pressure might have worked. If other worlds had stopped trading with the attackers, they would have given up. "Excellent point," Professor Kelvin said. Kevin raised 2 of his forearms. Cultural exchange programs could have helped. If the 2 sides had understood each other better, they might not have fought at all. Several Valkyrie students began singing in harmony. Their translator converted their music into words. Art and beauty can soften hard hearts. A festival of shared culture might have brought peace. Professor Kelvin nodded approvingly at each suggestion. The class was going exactly as it always did. Students proposed gentle solutions while Professor Kelvin praised their creativity and wisdom. Then Professor Kelvin's many eyes. "Miss Martinez," Professor Kelvin said, "surely humanity has some ideas about peaceful conflict resolution. We would very much like to hear your perspective." Lisa looked up from her tablet. Around the room, her classmates turned to face her with interest. They were always curious about human thoughts and customs. "You want to know how humans would have handled the siege of Tertius 7? Lisa asked. "Yes, please. Share with us your species' approach to making peace." Lisa stood up and walked to the holographic display. The 3-dimensional battlefield rotated slowly in front of her. She studied the ship positions, supply routes, and defensive structures for a moment. "Humans would not have let it become a 3-month siege," Lisa said in a calm voice. "We would have ended it in 3 days." Even the usual background humming of the translator devices seemed to fade away. Professor. Kelvin tilted his insect head. Through what kind of diplomatic channels would humans have achieved this? No diplomacy, Lisa replied. She pointed to specific locations on the hologram. Ground troops would attack from these directions at the same time. Ships would block all escape routes. Psychological warfare would break the defenders' will to fight. The silence in the room grew thicker. Several students seemed to have trouble breathing. Their translator devices repeated Lisa's words as if they could not believe what they had. Heard, Miss Martinez, Professor Kelvin said very carefully. This is a class about peaceful solutions to conflict. You asked how humans would handle it, Lisa said. She looked confused by their reaction. Humans do not do long sieges. We use overwhelming force, precise strategy, and total victory. The siege ends when the enemy surrenders or stops existing. A Velkari student made a sound like a broken song. Her skin turned pale colors that Lisa had learned meant fear or distress. But what about all the people who would die? The Velkari student asked. Fewer people would die, Lisa answered matter-of-factly. Every day that siege continued, soldiers and civilians died. Humans end wars quickly to save lives overall. Professor Kelvin's compound eyes blinked rapidly. He seemed to be having trouble processing what he had heard. Perhaps we should move on to our next case study. Lisa walked back to her seat, not understanding why everyone looked so shocked. She had simply answered their question honestly. Around her, the friendly conversations that usually filled the classroom had stopped completely. For the rest of the class, Professor Kelvin asked for more peaceful solutions to historical conflicts. Every hand, tentacle, and appendage in the room went up except Lisa's. She sat quietly, taking notes, while her classmates proposed their gentle, diplomatic answers. But now Professor Kelvin avoided calling on her. The other students seemed to lean away from her desk. The comfortable atmosphere of the classroom had changed into something tense and worried. When class ended, there were no friendly discussions or study group. Invitations like usual. Lisa gathered her materials slowly, wondering what she had done wrong. Professor Kelvin approached her with hesitant steps. His usually confident manner seemed shaky. Miss Martinez, he said quietly, perhaps in future classes you might consider being less direct with your responses. Your classmates appear to be somewhat disturbed. Lisa looked at him with genuine confusion. Professor, they asked for the human perspective on conflict resolution. I gave them the human perspective. Yes, but perhaps you could focus on humanity's peaceful achievements. Your species must have some diplomatic successes in your history, Lisa. Thought about this for a moment. We do have those. But you specifically asked about ending a military siege. Humans are very good at ending military sieges. Professor Kelvin's antennae drooped. I see. Well, tomorrow we will discuss trade disputes. Perhaps that will offer better opportunities for human input. As Lisa left the classroom, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Earth's government had chosen her carefully for this program. She had excellent grades, spoke multiple alien languages, and had studied interstellar relations for years. But nobody had warned her that honest human answers would frighten her alien classmates. Walking through the station corridors, Lisa passed groups of students. Their conversations stopped when they saw her. Only after she had passed did they start talking again, but now in worried whispers. Word was already spreading about the human who talked about orbital bombardment like it was a normal classroom. Topic in her small dormitory room that night, Lisa sat by the window looking out at the stars. Tomorrow's class would be about trade disputes. She hoped it would go better than today. After all, how scary could human business practices possibly seem to her alien classmates? The next morning, Lisa arrived at her trade relations class early. She wanted to get a good seat and hoped today would go better than yesterday. The classroom was smaller than Professor Kelvin's room, with chairs arranged in a circle to encourage discussion. Professor Yalera was already there, preparing the holographic display with her forearms moving in smooth patterns. She was a Nexary with beautiful silver markings that sparkled under the classroom lights. Lisa had always found Professor Yalera to be kind and patient with students. As other students entered the room, Lisa noticed something troubling. They were choosing seats that left empty spaces around her. Yesterday there had been students sitting next to her and behind her. Today, there was a ring of empty chairs surrounding her like she had some kind of disease. Janet the Zephyrian floated in and gave Lisa a nervous look before choosing a seat across the room. Kevin the Nexari, who usually sat nearby and asked her about human culture, found a chair near the door. The Velkar students clustered together on the far side of the circle, their skin showing muted colors that Lisa had learned meant anxiety. Lisa tried to smile at her classmates, but most of them looked away quickly. Word about yesterday's class had clearly spread around the university. She felt her stomach tighten with worry. Professor Yalera activated the holographic display, and a complex map of trade routes appeared above their heads. Colored lines showed the flow of goods between different star systems with numbers indicating the value of various trades. Today we will examine the copper conflict, Professor Yalera announced. This was a dispute between the Rigelian Collective and the Outer Rim Trading Company. They fought over mining rights for 6 months. Commerce was disrupted across 17 systems. The hologram zoomed in to show the disputed territory. Mining stations, trade ships, and resource deposits were marked with different symbols. Lisa could see that it was a complicated situation with both sides having valid claims. Owned the legal rights to mine the copper, Professor Yalera continued, but they did not have the equipment to extract it. The trading company had all the necessary machinery, but no legal permission to use it. Professor Yalera looked around the room with her large, intelligent eyes. How might this dispute have been resolved more quickly and fairly?
The familiar
pattern began. Arms and tentacles rose around the room as students offered their suggestions. Janet's body glowed with soft blue light as she spoke. A joint partnership would have been perfect. The Regilians could have provided the legal rights, while the trading company provided the equipment. They could have shared the profits. Wonderful thinking, Professor Yalera said, gesturing approvingly with 2 of her arms. Kevin raised one arm while using his other 3 to make complex hand gestures. Maybe an independent arbitrator could have helped them negotiate. Someone neutral who could find a fair solution for both sides. Several Valkyrie students began their musical discussion. Their harmonious voices blended together as they proposed cultural exchange programs and friendship festivals to build trust between the 2 groups. Professor Yalera listened to each suggestion with interest and praise. The discussion was going exactly as these classes always did, with creative and peaceful solutions flowing freely. Then Professor Yalera's eyes turned to Lisa. The room became quiet as everyone waited to hear what the human would say. Lisa had been studying the trade route data carefully. She could see the underlying economics of the situation and the strategic positions of both parties. Miss Martinez, Professor Yalera said with an encouraging smile, surely humanity has experience with commercial disputes. How would your people approach this kind of trade conflict? Lisa stood up and approached the holographic display. Around the room, she could feel her classmates tensing up like prey animals sensing a predator. Humans would not have let it become a 6-month trade dispute, Lisa said in the same calm tone she had used yesterday. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. We would have conducted deep research on both parties first, Lisa continued, pointing to different areas of the hologram. Financial analysis, supply chain mapping, political vulnerability assessment. Then we would have created leverage. Leverage? Professor Yalera asked. Her voice carried a note of concern that had not been there moments before. Economic warfare, Lisa explained matter-of-factly. Humans would have identified which Rigelian colonies depended on food imports and which trading company executives had family members in vulnerable positions. We would have quietly bought controlling interests in their competitors and prepared to launch coordinated financial attacks. The silence in the room was so complete that Lisa could hear the humming of the air recycling system. Then we would have invited both parties to negotiations, Lisa continued. Not to find a fair compromise, but to present them with a choice. Accept our solution, or face systematic economic destruction. A Velkari student made a sound like a dying musical note. Her skin had turned colors that Lisa recognized as terror. The dispute would have ended in 3 days instead of 6 months, Lisa concluded. Both parties would have gotten exactly what we decided they deserved. Human traders would have established permanent control in both territories. Professor Yilara's forearms had frozen in mid-gesture. Miss Martinez, surely you are speaking. Hypothetically, this is based on the Henderson Protocol, Lisa replied. It was developed after the Martian trade wars in 2387. Standard. Human practice for resolving commercial disputes involving strategic resources. But what about fairness? Professor Yilara asked. What about mutual benefit? What about respecting the rights of sovereign peoples? Lisa looked genuinely puzzled by these questions. Professor, you asked how humans would resolve it efficiently. The Henderson Protocol has a 96% success rate with an average resolution time of 2.3 days. What happened to the other 4%? Kevin asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. They chose economic destruction over cooperation, Lisa answered simply. Their markets were absorbed by human trading corporations within 18 months. Professor Yilara's translator device seemed to struggle with processing this information. It made several clicking sounds before producing words. Miss Martinez. When we discuss trade relations, we focus on outcomes that benefit everyone involved. Human trade relations do benefit everyone, Lisa said. She seemed confused by their reaction. We benefit, and our partners benefit, from not being economically destroyed. Everyone wins. Professor Yilara tried to regain control of the class. Perhaps we should look at some historical examples of successful trade partnerships. For the rest of the class period, Lisa sat quietly while her classmates proposed gentle solutions to various commercial disputes. She took careful notes, but did not speak again. Professor Yilara avoided calling on her. The other students seemed afraid to even look in her direction. When class ended, Lisa found herself walking alone through the corridors once again. The whispered conversations that followed her had grown more intense and worried. She caught fragments in various languages, but they all seemed to center around the same themes. The human thinks like a predator. The human treats everything like war. The human is dangerous. That evening, Lisa received a message on her communication device. It was from Dr. William Gray, her faculty advisor back on Earth. Lisa, we have received some concerning reports from Kepler Prime University. Your professors are requesting cultural sensitivity guidance for managing human participation in their programs. Can you explain what is happening there? Lisa sat on her bed and composed her response carefully. Dr. Gray, I am answering their questions accurately and completely. Every scenario they present, they ask for human solutions. I provide human solutions. The problem seems to be that human solutions are more direct and effective than they expected. Gray's reply came quickly. Lisa, remember that you are representing all of humanity to these alien species. Perhaps you could emphasize our diplomatic achievements, our peace treaties, our humanitarian aid programs. Lisa stared at the message for a long time before responding. Sir, they are not asking about our humanitarian aid programs. They are asking about conflict resolution and trade disputes. Should I lie about how humans actually handle these situations? The response took much longer this time. Not lie, but perhaps provide context. Help them understand the reasoning behind our approaches. Lisa began to realize that the problem was not her answers. The problem was that nobody had prepared the other species for what human answers would actually sound like. She thought about tomorrow's class on strategic resource management. Based on the patterns so far, it was probably going to be even worse. Then today, as she prepared for bed, Lisa wondered if she was failing in her mission to represent humanity well. But she also wondered if maybe the galaxy needed to understand what humans were really like, rather than what they hoped humans would. Be like, the truth about human nature was apparently much more frightening than anyone had expected. Professor Kelvin's office had never been so crowded. All the alien teachers from the university had squeezed into the small space for an emergency meeting. The air recycling system worked hard to handle the different breathing needs of 12 different species, creating a low humming sound that filled the room. Professor Yilara sat near the front, her forearms moving in agitated patterns. Her silver markings seemed duller than usual, as if the stress was affecting her natural coloring. The situation with the human student has become impossible, she announced to the group. Professor Telwyn, a tall Valkyrie with deep blue throat sacs, sang a mournful tune. Yesterday, Miss Martinez described how humans would handle resource shortages. She explained that humans would gain complete control of all dilithium mines through corporate spying, strategic purchases, and targeted killings of opposition leaders. The room filled with worried sounds from various species, clicking, humming, and soft musical notes created a symphony of distress. Professor Kelvin's compound eyes reflected the light as he spoke. When I asked her about the ethics of such actions, she said that controlling the resource would let humans give it to useful allies, while denying it to potential enemies. Dean Vorthok, a massive being made of living crystal, spoke in a voice that resonated through the room's walls. The students are terrified. More than half have stopped attending her classes. The Valkyrie families are asking for protective guards. Professor Yalera's arms moved faster. She is not violent or mean. She is actually quite polite and friendly. But the things she describes so casually make my skin crawl. She talks about economic warfare like discussing the weather, Professor Telwin sang sadly. Yesterday, a student asked what humans would do about overpopulation on colony worlds. She began calculating optimal death rates for sustainable population reduction through controlled starvation. Dean Vorthok's crystal body flickered with different colors. The Galactic Education Council specifically asked for human participation to add diversity to our programs. But this level of strategic thinking was completely unexpected. Professor Kelvin began pacing around the crowded room. Perhaps we should contact Earth and request a different student, someone more focused on diplomacy. Professor Yalera checked her data tablet. I looked at her file again. Lisa Martinez graduated with highest honors from the Earth Diplomatic Academy. She speaks 8 galactic languages fluently and wrote her final paper on peaceful cooperation between different species. On paper, she is exactly what we requested. Then why does she think like a military general? Professor Telwin's song carried notes of genuine confusion. Dean Vorthok was quiet for a long moment before speaking. Like a military general, she thinks like a human. The room became completely silent as everyone considered what this meant. Are you saying that all humans think this way? Professor Kelvin asked, his antennae twitching nervously. Consider the evidence, Dean Vorthok replied slowly. Every scenario we present, regardless of the topic, she approaches with the same method. Identify weaknesses, use advantages, achieve total victory in minimum time. This is not military training. This is basic human problem solving. Professor Yalara's 4 hands moved in distressed patterns. But humans have diplomatic organizations, peace treaties, humanitarian groups. Yes, Dean Vorthok said. And those are the products of human strategic thinking applied to long-term stability goals. Humans make peace treaties because they are more efficient than continuous warfare. They provide humanitarian aid because stable regions make better trading partners. They negotiate because it is often faster than conquest. Professor Telwin's throat sacs deflated like balloons losing air. You're saying that even human diplomacy is just warfare by other means? I am saying that humans appear to approach every problem as if it were a war, then select the most efficient solution. Whether that is negotiation, economic pressure, or actual combat, Professor Kelvin stopped pacing. This explains why she seems so confused by our reactions. She thinks she is being helpful by providing efficient solutions. Meanwhile, we are horrified because she is casually describing the systematic destruction of entire civilizations as homework assignments. Professor Yalera added, the meeting was interrupted by a soft chime from the communication system. Vorthok's assistant, a young Nexari with nervous gestures, appeared on the holographic screen. Dean Vorthok, I apologize for interrupting, but there has been a development. Miss Martinez has submitted a proposal for her final project. The faculty members looked at each other with alarm. What kind of proposal? Dean Vorthok asked carefully. Wants to conduct a comprehensive analysis of the university's defensive capabilities and develop improved security protocols. She says she has noticed several serious vulnerabilities in our current systems. Several teachers made worried sounds. Did she specify what kind of security threats she is concerned about? Professor Yalera asked. Yes, ma'am. She listed hostile boarding attacks, economic infiltration, psychological warfare campaigns, and standard destabilization protocols that any competent human intelligence operation would use against an institutional target like Kepler Prime. Professor Telwin's song became barely audible. She has been analyzing us this entire time. She says she wants to help make the university safer, the assistant continued. Oh? She has already identified 47 potential failure points in our current security arrangements. Dean Vorthok dismissed the assistant and turned back to his worried colleagues. It appears that Miss Martinez has been conducting exactly the type of strategic assessment she described in her classes. On us, Professor Kelvin said flatly. The question, Dean Vorthok continued, is whether we view this as a threat or an opportunity. Professor Yalara's arms moved in complex patterns of thought. It's an opportunity? She is treating our university like a military target. No, Dean Vorthok corrected. She is treating our university like something valuable that needs protection. There is a significant difference. Professor Telwin's throat sacs began to glow faintly. You think she is trying to help? I think she is doing exactly what any human would do when placed in a new environment. Assess the situation, identify problems, and develop solutions. The fact that her solutions sound terrifying to us does not mean they are wrong. Professor Kelvin stopped pacing again. Are you suggesting we actually let her conduct this security analysis? I am suggesting that we may have been looking at the situation backwards, Dean Vorthok replied. We have been trying to figure out how to manage the human problem. Perhaps we should be asking what problems the human can help us solve. Professor Yalara's markings grew brighter. You want to use her strategic thinking for our benefit? Want to understand whether her strategic thinking could benefit everyone? Dean Vorthok said. What if the reason her solutions sound so effective is because they actually are effective? The meeting continued for another hour, but the basic question remained unanswered. What do you do when your exchange student thinks like a predator, but might be the most strategically valuable mind in your institution? Outside the conference room, Lisa Martinez sat in the university library, working on her security assessment. She had no idea that she was the subject of an emergency faculty meeting. From her perspective, she was simply doing what humans always did when they encountered problems. She had noticed that Kepler Prime's docking procedures had obvious weaknesses. The communication systems could be easily compromised by anyone with basic technical knowledge. The emergency protocols were completely inadequate for several types of crisis scenarios that she could think of. Off the top of her head, these seemed like important issues that someone should address before they became serious problems. Lisa had no way of knowing that her professors were debating whether she represented humanity's greatest diplomatic asset or its most frightening threat. Was just trying to be helpful and do good work. The galaxy was apparently not ready for helpful humans. The message came from the highest levels of the Galactic Education Council. Director Prime Zaxxon, an ancient crystal being whose light patterns showed centuries of experience, had read all the reports from Kepler Prime University. Instead of being worried, he seemed interested and curious. The human student will be given a practical test, the message stated clearly, a real situation where her strategic abilities can be properly evaluated. Dean Vorthok received the orders with mixed feelings. Either this would prove that Lisa Martinez was valuable to galactic civilization, or it would show that humans were too dangerous for peaceful cooperation. Both possibilities carried huge consequences for the future. The situation was already happening. 3 days ago, a galactic patrol ship called the Sovereign Grace had disappeared near the border with the Keth Empire. 26 crew members from 5 different species were missing. The ship's last message said they were investigating strange energy readings from an asteroid field that was not on any official maps. Normal search and rescue efforts had failed completely. The Galactic Patrol had sent 6 ships over 2 days with no results. Diplomatic talks with the Keth had produced nothing but denials. The families of the missing crew were becoming desperate and angry. Dean Vorthok called Lisa to his office to explain the situation. This is not a classroom exercise, he told her seriously. Real lives are at stake. Real families are waiting for answers. Lisa studied the tactical display showing the search area. Her expression was calm and focused. What resources are available? For the search, 2 patrol ships, long-range sensors, and full diplomatic permission to operate in the disputed zone. The Keth have agreed to allow search operations but refuse to provide direct help. What are the time constraints? The ship is intact but without power. The crew's life support systems will fail in about 60 hours. If they are prisoners somewhere, we have no way of knowing their condition. Lisa examined the data for several minutes. Dean Vorthok and her professors watched nervously as she processed the information with the same careful method she used for classroom problems. I need additional resources, Lisa said finally. What kind of resources? Dean Vorthok asked cautiously. 3 things. First, I need detailed intelligence on Keth's military operations in this sector for the past 6 months. Second, I need economic data on rare mineral trades between the Keth Empire and independent mining companies. Third, I need to speak directly with the families of the missing crew members. Professor Kelvin's antennae twitched with confusion. What does mineral trade data have to do with a search and rescue operation? Pattern analysis, Lisa replied. If this was a planned operation rather than an accident, there will be economic indicators. Pirates do not steal patrol ships unless they want something specific. Neither do governments. Dean Vorthok authorized the data requests, though he was not entirely sure he wanted to know what Lisa would do with the information. 6 hours later, Lisa presented her findings to the emergency command center that had been set up at the university. Commander Torres, the Galactic Patrol officer coordinating the official search efforts, listened with growing amazement. The Sovereign Grace was not destroyed or captured randomly, Lisa announced. It was taken by a joint Keth pirate operation targeting its cargo manifest. What cargo? Commander Torres asked. The ship was on routine patrol duty. Lisa displayed a complex economic analysis on the holographic projector. 3 months ago, the Keth Empire quietly purchased mining rights to 17 asteroid fields. In neutral space? 2 weeks ago, they began selling processed rare earth elements at 30% below market value. Yesterday, their primary competitor, Nexus Mining Corporation, announced they were suspending operations because they could not match Keth pricing. The command center fell silent as everyone realized what this meant. The Keth are not just undercutting the market, Lisa continued. They are destroying it systematically. But they do not have the processing facilities to handle this volume of raw materials. So where are they processing it? Commander Torres asked. Hidden facility, somewhere in this asteroid field. The Sovereign Grace detected the energy signature of industrial-scale mineral processing. The Keth could not let that information reach Galactic Patrol headquarters. But why not just destroy the ship? Professor Yalera asked. Because they needed the crew alive as bargaining tools, and they needed the ship's sensor logs to determine how much the patrol knows about their operation. Lisa manipulated the display, highlighting specific asteroids in the search area. The facility will be located at one of these 3 positions. It's places that provide cover from standard patrol routes, but remain accessible to Keth's supply ships. Commander Torres studied the analysis with growing respect. This is actually brilliant reasoning, but how do we proceed? If we search these locations, the Keth will know we have identified their operation. We do not search, Lisa said calmly. We make them come to us. Lisa's plan was simple and absolutely terrifying. Within 2 hours, she had created a fake intelligence report indicating that the Galactic Patrol had identified the Keth mining operation but believed it was located in a completely different star system. The report was accidentally transmitted on a frequency that Keth's intelligence regularly monitored. At the same time, she arranged for Nexus Mining Corporation to announce a major new contract that would allow them to resume operations at full scale, effectively ending the Keth economic strategy. Now we wait, Lisa explained to the increasingly nervous command staff. The Keth have approximately 4 hours to make a decision. Abandon their facility and lose months of investment, or eliminate the threat to their operation. What threat? Commander Torres asked. Us. They will realize that if we know about their mining operation, we probably know about the Sovereign Grace. They will have to move the prisoners to avoid a diplomatic incident. Move them where? Lisa smiled for the first time since the crisis began. The only place they can, their main processing station, and when they do, our sensors will track the movement. The plan worked exactly as Lisa predicted. 8 hours later, Keth transport ships were detected moving between asteroids in the search area. The Galactic patrol ships followed at maximum sensor range, leading them directly to a massive hidden mining facility carved into a hollowed-out asteroid. The rescue operation was completed without a single injury. The Sovereign Grace crew was recovered safely, along with evidence of the illegal mining operation that violated 6 different space treaties. The Keth Empire faced massive fines and diplomatic punishment. While Nexus Mining Corporation resumed normal operations, Director Prime Zaxxon arrived at Kepler Prime University 3 days later to personally interview Lisa about the operation. Remarkable. The ancient crystal being noted, his light patterns shifting with what might have been admiration. A complex strategic situation resolved in less than 12 hours, with 0 casualties and maximum political advantage for the Council. Lisa sat across from him in Dean Vorthok's office, looking slightly uncomfortable with all the attention. 8. Simply applied standard analysis methods, she said. The pattern was obvious once you had sufficient data. Obvious to a human mind, perhaps, Director Prime Zaxxon replied. Tell me, Miss Martinez, what do you see as the long-term effects of this incident? Lisa considered the question carefully. The Keth will improve their intelligence operations to prevent similar exposures. Nexus Mining will implement better security for competitive information. The Galactic Patrol will add economic analysis as a standard part of search and rescue procedures. And the broader diplomatic situation? The Keth learned that illegal operations in disputed space carry unacceptable risks. Other species learned that the Council can solve complex problems efficiently. Everyone learned that cooperation produces better results than conflict. Director Prime Zaxxon's light pattern shifted to something that might have been amusement. You believe this incident will promote peace? I believe this incident will promote rational decision-making, Lisa replied. Peace is generally the most rational choice. After Director Prime Zaxxon left, Dean Vorthok found himself alone with Lisa in his office. Miss Martinez, I owe you an apology. We spent weeks worrying about your strategic thinking, but we failed to understand that strategy in service of protection is very different from strategy in service of conquest. Lisa looked genuinely confused. Dean Vorthok, I am not sure I understand. The distinction. Human strategic thinking is always in service of human goals. The goals determine whether the strategy is cooperative or aggressive. And your goals here? To learn about other species, represent humanity positively and help. Solve problems when possible. The same goals I have had since I arrived. Dean Vorthok realized that this might be the most important lesson of the entire exchange program. Humans were not naturally aggressive or peaceful. They were naturally strategic. The difference lay not in their methods, but in their objectives. Miss Martinez, would you be interested in extending your stay at Kepler Prime? We have several other situations that could benefit from human analysis. Lisa smiled. We'd be honored, Dean Vorthok. Though you might want to warn the other students that I will still be giving human answers to their questions.